Well, first of all, before you identify it as a danger, you have to identify the history behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's always the Hegelian dialectic behind everything that they do, where they will create a problem and then offer the people the solution, and then take away the freedoms from the people in order to implement the solution and make money from it. Okay, and that's precisely what the World Health Organization and the World Economic Forum are designed to do. You're talking about the two largest criminal organizations on the planet after the United Nations. These were designed from within the United Nations to be criminal organizations, to plan events, to make money from it, to enslave people, and to profit from the implementation so that their world technocracy agenda can be fulfilled in the New World Order and the Agenda 2030 with the 17 UN Sustainable Goals.
Mm. The UN Sustainable Goals, of which that's what we see. The Prime Minister wears those badges.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
Mm.
She doesn't wear the badge anymore.
Right.
She was wearing the badge while she thought she was going to get the office of UN Secretary General.
Yeah.
That's no longer the case. You don't see her wearing it anymore.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I will have to wait to see her at the UN to see what she wears at the UN.
She may put it on at the UN to save face, but that job at the UN Secretary General went to the German foreign minister, who is a direct descendant of one of Adolf Hitler's security SS guards.
So then you're saying, anyway, that's a different point. I will have to pick that up to see whether they chose the UN Secretary General again. But let's go to this public health, because I saw it on the World Economic Forum site that they are now saying that it is it's a public health crisis. You hear CARICOM is declaring it that as well, and you're hearing governments, their prime ministers are now saying that. Is there a danger to that, in your opinion?
Of course there is.
What is the danger?
The massive danger is that you are, and this began this agenda of crime becoming a public health crisis was actually put in place for the Caribbean region in 2023, and that happened at the Caribbean Heads of Government Summit in Nassau, Bahamas, which was chaired by the then Vice President of the United States of America, Kamala Harris, where she outlined to the Caribbean governments that the focus on Caribbean security, in other words, we are authorizing criminal activity and illegal immigration, as well as weapons running and illicit narcotics, was to be implemented as soon as possible, with Trinidad being the headquarters. Okay.
Yeah, I remember
Right.
that. Yeah.
Now, the minute, less than 2 weeks following the Caribbean Heads of Government Summit in Nassau, you saw a crime wave descend on the Caribbean region with unprecedented fury. Simply because it was sponsored by the United States State Department at the time, and the evidence to support that is in the manual for subversive warfare and irregular warfare. And I just want to read something for the public so that they understand how it's carried out, because the financial incentive had to happen in order for the crimes to be committed. Okay, so what I'm about to read to the public comes from the Special Operations Manual of Irregular Warfare of the United States military. And this is Financial Instrument of U.S. National Power and Unconventional Warfare. This is paragraph 2-45. Like the economic activity which all nation states, human groups, and individuals respond to, American Special Operations Forces can use financial power as a weapon in times of conflict, up to and including large-scale general war. Like the economic activity that it is related to, most financial power is unmanaged, routine, and peaceful. However, manipulation of U.S. financial strength can leverage the policies and cooperation of state governments. Financial incentives and disincentives can build and sustain international coalitions waging or supporting United States irregular warfare campaigns. As part of an interagency effort, the U.S. Treasury can recommend changes to U.S. policy that can provide such incentives to state governments and others at the national strategic policy level. Participation in international financial organizations such as the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and the Bank of International Settlements offers the U.S. diplomatic financial venues to accomplish such coalitions. Well, there you have it.
Can you translate for people who are listening exactly what did you just read?
What I just read is the outline of how the United States State Department orchestrated the entire support of the World Economic Forum and World Health Organization narrative of crime being a public health emergency. The World Health Organization could put it forward simply because the World Health Organization had already suspended the constitutions of 194 countries. And that's what happened here in Barbados. The minute that our constitution was suspended in 2020, upon the declaration in Parliament by the Attorney General that there was a public health emergency of international concern, this allowed the entire floor to be opened to unconstitutional and illicit activity. And the narrative of crime being a public health emergency could be put forward as the most dangerous weapon of unconventional warfare against the population, to induce fear, to depend on the government for protection. And that protection would come in the form of vaccination. It would come in the protection of removal of freedoms and rights and liberties, and also a step-by-step, stone-by-stone implementation, what we call the tiptoe towards tyranny, the tyrannical tiptoe. And what you have is that you have that tyrannical tiptoe, step by step by step, moving into the technocratic age, where you have the implementation of the social credit system, you have a central bank digital currency, you have a digital ID, you have the freedoms and expressions being removed and eroded in the cybercrime bill, you have the entire technocracy platform being supported by digital cameras as well as facial recognition. And then at the end of the day, you create an incident, which we call a black swan or a false flag, in order to be able to create enough panic in the population that they beg the government for intervention. And when that happens, the government seizes control.
You know, I was reading up some before you guys came on today. I started to do some research, and there are quite a number of organizations and groups and that are concerned about this public health crisis term that is being used for crime.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons that they said, Mr. Corbin and others, is that the expansion of government power under the guise of health. And you made mention of, them declaring a public health emergency. And then it gives the government, Apostle Scanterbury, extraordinary power. So we hear this and they said, oh, crime is a public health crisis. But it's a possibility of what that could be used for, to expand the government power under the guise of health. They said here that it can justify militarized policing, curfews, digital surveillance, quarantining of high-risk individuals, and even forced interventions in the name of public safety, because it is a public health crisis. It blurs the line between medical authority and law enforcement, opening the door for dangerous overreach. Let me go back to Mr. Corbin. Anything you want to add to that, Mr. Corbin?
Well, when you have the level of state sponsorship of crime, as we have seen here in Barbados, because the crime wave in Barbados is state sponsored. There is no question.
That's your view on it, that it's sponsored. You believe
that is not only my view; those are the facts. Because there's no one that can dispute it, and there's no one that can join any forum we will ever have.
But how can we, like, Sonny, you said a couple of things. There's a link that I sent to Dave with a video, so Dave can put the link there. Is there anything that you can send to me that I can share, because tonight is a night where we're asking questions and we want people to go to research. So Sonny, if you can, Dave, if you could put the link in the chat for the video we just shared so that people can look at it. And so if you have anything, Mr. Corbin, that people can look at, because if you're saying it's state sponsored, can you give us a link? Can you qualify what you're saying? You know, how can you verify that for us?
Okay, well, that's pretty simple. Just go to unlimitedhangout.com.
Unlimited?
Unlimitedhangout.com.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and
Yeah.
type in what is the global public-private partnership. That's all you have to do.
The global public
What is
private.
the global public-private partnership?
Yes. Okay. Continue, sir.
Right.
We just want to, because we want people to learn and to understand. Yes.
So
Thank you so much.
once you understand what the global public-private partnership is, and going back to Lady Sunny's her contribution earlier, where she talked about the rules-based economy. This is all linked to that, and this is where the state takes command of the social partnership or the entire part of the economy and sponsors its activities either through the organization of the corporations and or private citizens being involved in their agenda. It is state-sponsored crime. There is no argument about this, and the evidence points to security companies being involved in the importation of weapons. And we have proof of this, where a security company that is well known across the Caribbean region is actually involved in the movement of weapons from Ukraine into the Caribbean.
Right.
We have not only the manifest, but we have actual photographs of the aircraft that landed here in Barbados and then went on to Trinidad. Okay? In addition to that, we also have another security company who operates out of Europe, who is very well known across the Caribbean region, we have the evidence of it being one of the largest arms traffickers in the Eastern Caribbean and Latin America. So when you have security companies can operate at will because they don't come under scrutiny, because these companies have government contracts to supply weapons and ammunition. In addition to that, they also have private people that work within these security companies that get contracts for these security companies for private businesses.
Right.
And you have a loophole open where private individuals can ask a favor within the security company, knowing full well that it will not be scrutinized. So, you tell me, this is not rocket science. This is intelligence. This is intelligence, okay? And whenever you have intelligence, you also have intelligent effort. And intelligent effort needs to be implemented when you have to look at something from critical thinking viewpoint. So let's look at this from a critical thinking viewpoint. If I wanted to carry out some sort of operation that involved the use of high-powered firearms, an AR-15, an AK-47, a CSR-14, whatever it is you want, okay? An M61 Vulcan cannon, okay? Anything, doesn't matter. GBU-113, any one of those, I can carry out any kind of crime using a high-powered weapon. Now, what would be my best avenue of getting that into the country with the least amount of scrutiny? A security company that already has contracts to supply the government. And you're trying to tell me that there's no government incentive or participation in this from a money-making perspective? Follow the money, Lady Marcia. That's all you have to do. Follow the money. Follow the money. All right? And you will very, very quickly arrive at the truth. Okay? And I don't care who is offended by what I have to say tonight. Call an ambulance. The most important thing is this. At the end of the day, we're faced with a situation and a crime situation that is off the rails simply because the government has sponsored the crime in support of a narrative that will end up in them seizing control and the rights and freedoms of the people of Barbados. Well, guess what? Over my dead body. Okay?
Wow. It's as I told you tonight, guys. Tonight was going to be lots of things you're going to hear. Be a student, go and research. It says to go to unlimitedhangout.com, and when you go there, type in what is the global public partnership. I'm going to go there, and I'm going to come back to you all, because that's what I love about it. Mr. Corbin, it's a learning. We're here to learn, and we're here to understand.
That's
And
right.
I think that is important. Now, I want to let me just go back to Apostle, and then back to you. And no, in fact, let's stay with Mr. Corbin a little, because he's just come in. I talked about the expansion of government power under the guise of health. And it kind of, I mean, you're basically saying the same thing that you were saying, that if they continue with that narrative that crime is a public health crisis, then I think we can clearly see the possibility. Would you agree, audience, that they could expand the government power under the guise of health? So we have to be on the lookout. And that's why we're all on the show tonight, to say, be careful. The next thing I found, Mr. Corbin, and I want to discuss this with you before I go to the other guests, is the mental health criminalization, where there can be probably the labeling of criminals as at risk or mentally unwell, and they could probably lead to forced therapy, medication, or institutionalization. The psychiatric hospitals might get bigger, or people like you and I. What about political critics or social threats? They could probably put us under that health framework. And the people like Sonny and Apostle, they call us, they mislabel us, and say that we have a mental health. We're experiencing a mental health crisis. Is that possible? You think, Mr. Corbin?
Well, just let me make one thing very, very clear. Okay? And to anybody in the government who is listening to this broadcast tonight, I want to make one very, very important point very, very clear to you. I said to the former commissioner of police, when he expressed concern that maybe they would send or give him orders to come from me. And I said to him, I said, boss, if they give you an order to come from me, send one man with one gun and one bullet and make sure I don't get back up. Because if you send an army, you have to very carefully decide how many you're willing to lose to get one. Understand one thing very clearly, Lady Marcia. We're at an existential crisis in this country with regard to our very existence as a people and as a nation. Those persons who refuse to stand up and take issue with the situation will be the ones that will suffer the most.
Yeah.
I have no intention of standing idly by and doing anything less than what I'm doing. I will expand my operations and my activity. And that will happen tomorrow. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So you heard it here first. That will happen tomorrow. I will be expanding my operations. The Operation Liberation will be expanded exponentially tomorrow. I want to make another point very clear with regard to the crime situation in Barbados. You have to remember too, that the Barbados Police Service, and we have to make one very clear distinction here between what was the Barbados Police Force and the Barbados Police Service. Now, we mentioned the suspension of the Constitution. The Barbados Police Force, under an active Constitution, the reason it was called a force was because under constitutional authority, a police force is the protector of the people from the government. Under the illegitimate, unconstitutional republic of the current crew in charge in Barbados, the police service is the protector of the state from the public.
Right.
There is no protect and serve anymore. Okay? Because there's no constitutional authority. Now, let us move on. The most important thing that the narrative of the government is trying to support is that we have to connect the dots. We have to think critically here. Let us look at the dynamic of the crime that is happening. These are happening between so-called gang members. What happened in 2023 that took everybody kind of by surprise? The Prime Minister negotiated an amnesty between the two warring factions, or the alleged warring factions. This was a trap. This was a trap. And I will say to anyone who knows anybody in a gang, listen very carefully to what I'm about to say. Those individuals were led into a trap in order to be able to implement a surveillance system which was installed at District A police station. Okay? Now, there are one of three systems that could be installed there. Palantir, Toka, or Pegasus. All of them are originated from Unit 8200 of the Israeli Defense Force. The most important thing is this. Once you signed that pact of amnesty with the Prime Minister, certain information you made available to the Barbados Police Service without your knowledge, because every single telephone number and every single telephone conversation was tracked, and data logging and key logging was implemented against you. When the amnesty was then denied, the police service could use all of that information to bring the two gangs into warring with each other, which accomplished the goal of the government. Get the gangs to fight and kill each other, and we will then have a clear path to enslave the population through control mechanisms and surveillance. You understand now?
I'm Sunny. Mr. Corbin?
Well, forgive me for thinking critically from the intelligence background, but I see certain references in here, and it's quite obvious that this document is a fake and is inaccurate. Reason being is that if anybody had any understanding of the intelligence community, they would not use GCHQ. GCHQ stands for General Command Headquarters. Okay, that was used during the Second World War to denote the command office of Winston Churchill and so on, who were running the Second World War operations. If someone had said MI6, fine, no problem. And then the NSA has absolutely nothing to do with neural response analytics and black site interrogations. The NSA deals with the military security operations of the United States Intelligence Service. And it does its own research only for and in defense of the United States of America. It does not even speak to the NSA, to the CIA, or anyone like that. Yes, some interagency feedback may occur, but the NSA does not become involved in small island politics trying to figure out databases. Okay, and the Coleman moniker, okay, talking about existence being denied by every Caribbean government. This is just a publication of fiction in order to create the imaginary illusion that people can hang on to something that may some way or in some form go somewhere. It's like the whole White Hats organization that people have been following so avidly for the last 4.5 years that suddenly sprung up, and only to discover that the entire operation with QAnon and the White Hats and all this nonsense was nothing more than an Israeli intelligence psychological operation in data gathering.